Okay, so today we're going to talk about the Articles of Confederation and the events leading up to the Constitutional Convention. We just finished the end of the Revolutionary War, and during the Revolutionary War, the colonies decided they needed some form of government. And they didn't want a strong central government because that's exactly what they were fighting against. And each one of the colonies really felt like that they were an independent nation unto themselves. And so our first form of government is going to be known as the Articles of Confederation, 1781 to 1789. Now, for just a basic definition, a confederation is a league of independent states. Um, the closest thing you come to it today might be the United Nations, where it's a confederation of nations. And so the Articles of Confederation will create a system of government in which the central government is going to be very weak and most of the power is going to be in the hands of the states. So let's talk about the major features of the Articles of Confederation. Well, first off, it's going to create a unicameral legislature. Now, most of you have heard of a bicameral legislature, which means two houses. A unicameral legislature is one house. Now, every state in the Union today has a bicameral legislature except for Nebraska. Nebraska still runs a unicameral legislature. The United States Congress runs a bicameral legislature. It's a two-house legislature. But under the Articles of Confederation, there was one house. Each state in this legislature, this one house legislature, got one vote because they were all equal. They were all separate countries, is the way they saw it. You could send 4, 5, or 6, or 7 delegates there, but in the end, you got one vote, and that was it. Now, if you wanted to pass laws under the Articles of Confederation, it required a supermajority, 9 of 13. Not just a simple majority, it could have been 7 out of 13. So tough to pass laws. Then if you wanted to amend the articles, change the articles themselves, that would require a unanimous vote of all the states. Also very difficult to do. Now, there was not going to be a national judicial branch under this system. There's no independently elected executive branch. Sometimes people will say, who was the first president? They go, it wasn't George Washington, it was somebody else under the Articles. Well, these presidents were ceremonial. They were appointed by the Confederation Congress, really had no power. So there's really no independent judiciary. There's no independent executive branch. And the federal government, or the national government, the national government lacked specific powers. For example, the national government could not raise taxes. It had to depend upon the states to donate money. And that was difficult for the states to do. Because think about if you had to live off the generosity of your friends, that they would send you money every month so that you could survive. Well, they have bills and they have things they have to take care of. And so for this national government, they were always underfunded because the states needed their money. The national government could not regulate the currency. States were using different currencies. Some were using the Spanish dollar, some were using the English pound, some were printing their own money. Imagine trying to do business with so many different currencies going back and forth. They could not regulate trade. Trade wars were disrupting trade within the colony or in the states now. States were having trade wars by taxing other states' goods. And there was, they couldn't raise an army. They had to ask the states, would you please send volunteers? And the states were too busy really arming themselves, maybe to fight other states. There were a lot of land disputes about territory west of the Appalachians. So it's a very, very weak central government. And that's exactly what they wanted. They wanted a weak central government. Now, the Articles do have some successes. They were able to end the Revolutionary War. That's a positive. They also passed a series of land ordinances, including the famous Land Ordinance of 1787, which allowed a system in which these new lands could eventually become states, because there were questions about what would happen to all this new land that they got after the war. Would they be colonies? No, they're going to say, no, you're going to have a system in which you can become a state, that when you get to X number of people, you can have a territorial legislature. When you get to 60,000 people, you could apply to statehood and become a state equal to everybody else. One of the things that the Northwest Ordinance 1787 did was ban slavery in the Northwest Territories. Now, keep in mind, when we're talking about Northwest here, we're talking about Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Minnesota. That was the Northwest Territory at the time. So they did have some successes, but as a whole, the country had some severe problems. One of the problems was debt. A lot of the states had gone into debt to fight the war. They had borrowed money from citizens, and said, look, loan us money. And if we can beat the world's biggest superpower, we can pay you back. Whereas the British, when they went through, they paid in gold. So it took a big risk for Americans to loan money to this rebel government that may not have a chance to win, but they did. And now that the war is over, then they want their money, right? They took the risk to loan the money out, and now the war's over, they like to get paid. Well, the states would like to pay them. Now, some states were able to pay it off, but not all of them. There's a lot that couldn't. But the states got money from taxes, mainly taxes and trade. And now the country's in an economic depression because they had made all their money primarily through trade in the West Indies and with the British. And now that the war is over and the Americans wanted their independence, the British are not letting them trade with them anymore, right? It's like if you broke up with your boyfriend or girlfriend and you said, hey, I want to come over to your house and we'll go to the movies. They're going to say, no, you broke up with me. You lose those privileges. And so they're in this economic depression and they're in debt. So what do? Well, Massachusetts comes up with an idea. They say, okay, look, we got to pay off our debt. So we're going to pass a tax that impacts primarily small farmers. And then we'll pay off the people that we owe the money to, which tended to be the wealthier people. Well, small farmers were having problems because of the economic depression. And if you could not pay your taxes, the government would foreclose on your farm. Foreclose means that down at the courthouse, they auction off your land for the taxes that are due on the land. Well, this is Massachusetts. This is where rebellion started, right? And so they're going to rebel. And this is going to be known as Shays' Rebellion. A group of farmers led by Captain Daniel Shays and others will start a revolt against these taxes. They will march on courthouses, scare the judges away. No judge, no courthouse proceeding to foreclose. Therefore, your farm is protected. And they will go from farm to farm, from courthouse to courthouse to courthouse to do this. The governor eventually tries to call out the militia to stop Daniel Shays and his group. The militia joins Shays and his group. That's unfortunate. And there looks like there's no stopping Daniel Shays. Well, fortunately, there's a volunteer American army led by Benjamin Lincoln. They're able to come along and disperse Shays and his group. But for Massachusetts, this was a frightening thought. They think, okay, that volunteer army may be gone next year, and we're going to have this same problem. So Massachusetts passes another law, effectively canceling all their debts, saying, well, we don't owe money anymore. Well, that's now violating the rights of the creditors. I mean, imagine that today, that you buy savings bonds, you bought savings bonds your whole life, and you've got $1 million worth of savings bond. You go, now I'm going to retire on my savings bonds. And the government says, yeah, well, we're not going to pay that. You'd be a little bit angry about it. Well, there's a group of Americans, people like Alexander Hamilton and others, who are concerned about these debtor rebellions. And there are debtor rebellions in a lot of different places. And it looks like America is going into mob rule. And so they decide to have a convention. This will be known as the Annapolis Convention in 1786. And the purpose of this convention is to discuss, they say, matters of business and trade. Essentially, what's wrong with the Articles of Confederation? Well, they invite all the states to show up. Only 5 of 13 show up, so it's hard to do anything. But they are successful in getting the Confederation Congress to make a call from all the states. They said, would you make a call and get all the states together next year in Philadelphia in 1787 with the purpose of what they call revising the Articles of Confederation? Let's see what we can change. And this, of course, will be the Constitutional Convention, which we'll take up next time when we meet.